All right. Hey, good morning. Hope you guys survived all that flood water and storms we had here in our area last night. Man, it came down hard. Flood waters were everywhere. We had it yesterday morning, and then it seemed to continue. So I look like the roads are clear today, but wow, what some rain it was, and the thunder, and man, lightning. It was good. I enjoy that kind of weather occasionally. Not if I have to get out in it, but just listening to it. It was powerful. Both Jackson and Rachel, both our first responders, were out and about in it last night, and so prayed for them and ask God's grace to be with them and all the first responders have to get out in all that mess. And so, man, hope everything's going well. Hey, it's Thursday, so we're on that downhill slope for sure to the weekend, and man, they keep coming like clockwork. Hope you got a great weekend planned, and we're gonna do a little help my sister-in-law do a little moving, and I think today we're looking for suits for the wedding, and so all kind of stuff to get going on and getting into in our world. So that's what we got going on. And but today, man, we're not gonna finish. We may come close to finishing Colossians today. We'll see where we get. And we're just looking at friendships today. Paul has concluded everything he's going to say. These are now his wind up aspects of a letter, greet so-and-so, here's where I'm sending this person, and just kind of little concluding remarks. But and sometimes they're easy to gloss over, but I find them fascinating because when I see a name in the scriptures, man, I'm going to start searching that name. I want to know all about it and where they are and all of that. And so these are the valuable friendships that Paul has accumulated over the years. Now, he will be released. He's in prison right now, first imprisonment in Rome, house arrest. Got a soldier chained to him, but people are free to come and go. So it's kind of an unusual setting. They know he's no threat. They know he really doesn't even deserve any crime. But yet, since he appealed to Caesar, that's where he went. And all the scuttlebutt was that had he not done that, he would have been a free man today. So I think they understood he wasn't a threat at all, but they had to keep him there because he was awaiting trial, and it was just, going to be that kind of deal. So that's where he is. He'll be released. He will do what we would know as the fourth missionary journey, of which we know very little about, other than not through the scriptures at all, but through church history. We can see a little bit about where he went and what took place. And so he's about maybe 3 years away from being back in prison or being thrown into a dungeon hole where he will spend the rest of his days before he's beheaded. And from there, he'll write some pastoral epistles and things like that. So we are now, though, and this is where he is. So he knows he's going to be there for a while. He's just writing and to the church. And so here's the concluding deal. He says. So the first one we meet is Tychicus. He says, Tychicus will tell you all about the news about me. He is a dear brother, a faithful minister, and a fellow servant in the Lord. I am sending him to you for the express purpose that you may know about our circumstances and that he may encourage your hearts. He is coming with Onesimus, our faithful and dear brother, who is one of you. They will tell you of everything that is happening here. So this is what's going on. These guys are going to be traveling together. Tychicus and Onesimus. They're going to be heading from Rome over to Colossae to deliver this letter. And so what do we know about Tychicus? Well, we first met him when Paul was in Ephesus on his way to Jerusalem. If you were with us in the study of Acts, you'll remember this. But Paul has been to Europe. He's even collected money from the Gentiles because he has in his mindset that if he can get to Jerusalem, show that the Gentile church has collected money for them, that there's a love going on with them, and can share with them the great work that God is doing in the Gentiles, he can maybe create this bridge of divide that there was between Jews and Gentiles, because the Jews still didn't think that the Gentiles were really like part of the family. There were some that did, but it all had to do with the law. And you remember there was a big fight about the Gentiles should have to keep the law, and Paul's like, we're not even keeping the law. And so there was a big rift. In fact, it was on this journey that he gets arrested, and that's how eventually he ends up in Rome. So because when he gets to Jerusalem, it doesn't go well. So this is where he is. So we first meet Tychicus in Ephesus. and he's traveling to Jerusalem with Paul. He's one of the I think there were 4 or 5 that were were traveling with him. He was bringing kind of an entourage. He said, hey, look, man, look at these guys. These are fellow believers of yours. And so they're collecting all that money. He was evidently a pretty bright student of Paul and was passionate about Christ. Titus lets us know that he was on the short list to replace Titus. Paul, when he dropped Titus off, said, hey, I'm hoping to send Tychicus to you soon, and then I want you to come meet me. It was in one of his journeys. Paul did send him to Ephesus while he was in the dungeon hole, so to speak. Then he sends Tychicus because he's writing to Timothy, 2 Timothy 4, and he says, I've sent Tychicus kind of your way, right? And I need, so Tychicus was like that utility player. He could just plug and play. So if he needed someone to go take over the role of pastor in a place, he was the one that he did that with. He had been with Paul 4 years up to this point, and he's taken this letter and he's doing that. And he's going to be given some encouragement, right? He calls him a dear brother. Like, man, this guy's like dear brother. He's like close, man. This is like, if I got family in this world, he's it, right? And so this is who he is. He's considered a faithful deacon, the scripture says, and he's a faithful servant partner. That's how Paul describes him. Fellow minister, that's diakonos, and a fellow servant. And so, man, this guy's just a true servant. Now, he's taking with him Onesimus, and we're going to talk about Onesimus later, so I'm going to actually bypass this part because Onesimus is a slave. Paul wrote a whole letter for Onesimus's owner, who's in Colossae. Philemon is that book. We're going to look at that either tomorrow or Monday. So we're going to kind of bypass Onesimus and what took place there. And then we're going to jump into where he's verse 10. And so he says, my fellow prisoner Aristarchus sends you greetings, as does Mark, the cousin of Barnabas. You have received instruction about him too. If he comes to you, welcome him. Jesus, who is called Justus, also sends greetings. These are the only Jews among my co-workers for the kingdom of God, and they have proved a comfort to me. He's like, man, I'm surrounded by Gentiles. Not that there's anything wrong with that. He's just saying, he's just letting them know, man, these are the Jews that have stayed with me and have comforted me. Most of the Jews were having a little bit of trouble with Paul in that sense because he was just catching a lot of grief everywhere he went. So let's just look at these two. Aristarchus, we first met him again in Ephesus with Paul, if you followed our study in Ephesus, which was at the very beginning of this Daily Dose. It was the first book that we looked at. So he's 3 years he was with Paul, and he picked up Aristarchus while he was in Macedonia. So while he's in Macedonia, he picks up Aristarchus and he heads him over to Ephesus. And Paul preached boldly there for several months. So Aristarchus is with him in Ephesus when all this is going on. That's when the miracles were taking place. His handkerchief, Paul's handkerchief, had so much power in it, which is with a whole other story. And the aprons and everything. He was just healing was going on everywhere. So Aristarchus is seeing all this. It's crazy. Paul's driving out demons. There's a man named Demetrius there who's mad because Paul converted their prophet, and so he was a silversmith. He lost his business, so to speak. Because he was making shrines to Artemis, and so a riot breaks out there. You may remember that. We looked at that in Acts. A riot breaks out, and Gaius and Aristarchus are seized. So we know here that Aristarchus was one of them that was arrested with Paul at the very in one of those issues. After several hours, the city clerk quietly quieted everyone and restored peace. So he was with Paul from his arrest, and then he was with him all the way through the sailing, through the storms, the shipwreck, being bitten by the viper, and so he goes all the way through that. So he's what we would call a long haul friend, and it's powerful when you see that. Here's a guy that, man, they made a connection. And they just journey together through the thick and thin. You may have some of those friends. You may have some friends that have quit along you on the way, but you have those who have just stuck with you, right? That's what I would call kind of a sticky friend. And man, I'm grateful for those that know the worst about me, and they're still standing around me, right? And they're still for me and encouraging me. And so these are the friendships that we find in the life of Paul. So then he brings up John Mark. John Mark's an interesting character, and I think you already know all about him. But listen to what Paul says there. Um, he says, as does John Mark. My fellow prisoner Aristarchus sends you his greetings, as does Mark, the cousin of Barnabas. You have received instruction about him. Interesting, because the last time we see John Mark's name mentioned with Paul, there was a big riff. You remember that? It was back in Acts. They'd just finished their first missionary journey, Paul and Barnabas, traveling together. The church at Athens had set them apart, and so they are on their journey. They finish that. Barnabas brings his cousin John Mark with them, and so they travel. About halfway through that journey, John Mark, seeing the mountains and just it was a difficult place, rugged terrain, robbers were everywhere in these mountains. John Mark goes, "Hey man, I'm heading back," so he leaves them. So second missionary journey, Paul's like, "Hey man, we should go check on all those churches." To Barnabas, we should check on all those churches and see how they're doing. And Barnabas goes, "Great, man, I'll go get John Mark." And Paul says, "Not going to happen, man. Listen, he bailed on us. Not going to have it." There arose such a conflict that Barnabas, and in fact, we never read of Barnabas anymore after this. Barnabas and John Mark are gone. And Paul took Silas, and off they went. And so this was the big riff in the ministry early on. And we never hear of Barnabas again in the scriptural perspective. But we do John Mark. And so I find this interesting because he'll tell Timothy later on in his second imprisonment, "Hey, bring John Mark with you when you come. He is so valuable to me in ministry." And so you think, okay, here's this guy that you didn't want to have anything to do with. You kicked him out. No, you're done. So what happened between then and there? And so we can kind of trace and piece this through. And so what we find is that Peter refers to him as his son. So Barnabas, meaning son of encouragement, took John Mark, encouraged him, matured him, grew him, right? So we know that Barnabas and John Mark and Peter must have somehow connected at some point. And then so much so that Peter says, "Hey, this is like my son." Now, it's interesting because John Mark is the one who wrote the Gospel of Mark. And for the most part, those are really the memoirs of Peter. Peter had told him everything about Jesus and all of that. And John Mark's a powerful student of all of that. And so he begins to write Mark. And he's writing it based upon what Peter had told him. So here we see a friendship that came and went and came, right? Came, goes, and comes, right? So I'm sure they came close in the portion of the journey that they had in the first one, and then they doesn't see him, and then he hears reports about him, and then at some point, all we know is that John Mark is back with him, and then at the end of his life, he's going, "Hey, of all the relationships I have, I'm looking for my valuable friends. John Mark's one of them." I love that. I love the fact that, listen, friendships, they come and go, and they're seasonal, and sometimes there's rifts, and apparently they have repaired that. It's a powerful look at just the dynamics of friendships, right? It's a hard thing. Friendships are hard, right? I mean, the subtle nuances, the feeling left out or not included, and then just season of life kind of takes you in different directions, and travels and business and other things. They just sometimes friends are friends for a season, and I think we have to kind of be okay with that in that deal. And here was one that there was a friendship, and there was a rift. And then somehow there was a reuniting, and it even strengthened that relationship even better. And so I say that to a lot of us who maybe struggle with certain friendships and go, you know what, it's never over till it's over, right? I mean, I've got friends that I thought I'd walk through life with, man. Some of them don't even speak my name. Some of them have blocked me. I've got others that have been with me through thick and thin. I've got those that we were really close, and then we weren't for a season, and now we're close again. And so you're just going to have those. And I think through relationships, while as valuable as they are, Just don't hold on too tightly to those things. I mean, I think we ought to make every effort to maintain the friendships that we have, and we ought to work at those. I'm just saying sometimes season of life and other things kick in, different passions and different interests take place, and so life just goes on. I think that's what we're seeing here in this section here. And with Jesus' justice, we don't know much about him at all. We do know that he says, who's called justice sends greetings. These are the only Jews among my co-workers for the kingdom, for they have proved a comfort to me. So here's what you find out. Paul's going to look, man, and I'm sending justice to. Justice also sends greetings. He's just proven to be a comfort to me. He's just one of those people. Don't you love it when God sends you someone, and maybe it is only for a short season, but you know they're there, and they're just this comfort to you. All this mess going on, and you go, man, you know who's really just loving on me right now? It's this guy, right? Or it's this girl. And so Paul recognized that, and so he was grateful for justice and what was going on in his life. He said he was a fellow worker, a co-worker. That's not, hey, he's one of my hired hands. Oh, he's one of my my assistants. He said he's a co-worker. That's powerful when you start saying that, because men love to talk down about their friend. Oh, yeah, he works for me, or he's this or that, but when you say, hey, man, they're a co-worker, then you've elevated them to the same level as you are. And Paul saw great value in justice. Then we come to Epaphras, and he says, Epaphras, who is one of you. That is, that he came from Colossae. A servant of Christ Jesus sends greetings. He is always wrestling in prayer for you, that you may stand firm in all the will of God, mature and fully assured. I vouch for him that he is working hard for you and for all those at Laodicea and Hierapolis. Those are cities that were about 10 miles apart from Colossae. And so Paul's like, hey, man, I don't know what you guys know about Epaphras, but he's valuable, and he wrestles with you guys in prayer. I mean, he is like, man, when we have our prayer meeting, this guy is strong in praying for you. Don't you love people like that, man, who just like, they got your back spiritually, and they're praying for you, and they're checking on you. They're concerned about you. This is who Epaphras is. He was most likely the founding pastor. He's the one who came to Paul and said, hey, look, we got some issues going on. We got these Gnostics, this syncretism type stuff that's happening in the church. I just want you to be aware of it, because he's concerned about it. Concerned so much is their pastor. He's like, hey, I'm going to go find some help. I'm going to go find someone who will help me understand what's going on here, how to combat that. And then Paul graciously writes a letter to say, hey, take this, and make sure that they get it. And so he's wrestling for them in prayer, that they would stand firm, that they would be mature, that they would be assured. He says he's zealous. Man, that's a great term for someone who's like a pastor, and that's who he is. And then he comes down and he says, our dearest friend Luke, the doctor, and Demas sends greetings. Interesting things here. So he's got his dear friend Luke, right? And Luke has been with him almost from the beginning, right? He's a physician, Paul's most faithful companion. He's traveled with him everywhere. He gets to the end of, when he's in the dungeon hole, Luke is still there. And so we hear from there, Paul writes to Timothy, and he says, only Luke is with me. So when it got the worst of the worst, Luke's the one that was still standing there. That doesn't mean necessarily that all the others bailed on him. It only means that maybe they moved. Paul was sending some of these people out, so it may have been he sent everybody away to do ministry in his last days. So we're not assuming that everybody just quit on Paul, although Paul's specific about one that was. And so this is where we find him. So he wrote the book of Acts. He wrote the Gospel of Luke, and so this is who he is. Powerful man of God, and faithful, careful statistician, really, to let us know what took place through the book of Acts and through the book of Luke. And then we come to Demas, and he says, and Demas sends greetings. Now that's an interesting thing, because here he's in Rome, in prison, house arrest. Demas is serving with him. He's mentioned here. He's mentioned in Philemon as a fellow co-worker. But when Paul writes to Timothy, the last letter to Timothy, 2 Timothy, and he writes it, he's sitting in that dungeon hole. He says this to Timothy: bring John Mark. Only Luke is with me. And then he says this, Demas, having loved this present world, has left me. Now, interesting to know what that means. What does that mean? Did Demas desert the faith? Or was Demas like, hey, man, I got to go? He says he, having loved this present world. Maybe things were just getting so difficult and tough in Rome because at this time, Nero's beginning his thing, right? At the second imprisonment. And so it's very possible that there, Paul is just, it's brutal. Christians are being killed and everything else, and Demas is like, hey, I'm out of here. So, as an indictment on that is Demas, that's what it is. And so that's what's going on. And so then he has his concluding remarks, give greetings to my brothers and sisters in Laodicea, to Nympha and the church at her house. After this letter has been read to you, see that it's also read in the church of the Laodiceans, and that you in turn read it to the letter in Laodicea. We'll come back and make some closing comments on that, and then look at the letter of Philemon in the morning. All right, man, Lord bless you guys. Can't wait to share some of this truth with you. And stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the morning, Lord willing.